Have you ever wondered why certain fairy tales stay with you long after childhood ends? Why stories about enchanted forests, hidden monsters, or lost children echo in your adult life, in your fears, your desires, even in choices you can't explain? What if these stories were never just bedtime tales? They are mirrors, mirrors of the unconscious, and inside them hides your shadow, the part of you you've tried to forget, but which quietly shapes your personal myth. Think about it. Every culture creates myths. Nations tell themselves stories of destiny. Families pass down tales of resilience or sacrifice. And you carry your own private mythology. It whispers through the roles you play, the wounds you carry, the dreams you chase. It's the script you didn't know you were following. But here's the twist. Not all of your story belongs to you. Some parts were written by parents who expected you to shine in their image. Some by teachers who said you were too much or not enough. Some by society, handing you roles like the hero, the good girl, the provider, or the outsider. And in the margins of those scripts lies the shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The myths you carry, the ones you don't even know are guiding you, are far more powerful than your conscious plans. So, pause for a moment. Why do you keep choosing the same kind of partner, even when it ends in heartbreak? Why do certain emotions, anger, jealousy, feel so dangerous, as if they don't belong to you? Why do you sometimes feel like you're acting in a play you never auditioned for? That is the shadow speaking. And fairy tales, those enchanted maps, can guide us back into conversation with it. The villain you feared as a child may symbolize the part of yourself you've repressed. The lost wanderer in the woods may be the dream you abandoned. The dragon guarding the treasure may be your unclaimed power, waiting behind your fear. These aren't just stories, they're blueprints of the psyche. If you learn to read them, you'll uncover the hidden script of your personal myth. Stay with me until the end, because the last modern fairy tale we explore together carries the very shadow Jung feared most. And once you see it, you'll never look at your own story the same way again. We live in a world overflowing with stories. From Hollywood blockbusters to TikTok clips, from Marvel superheroes to Disney princesses, everywhere we turn there are modern myths. They tell us what love should look like, what success should feel like, even what it means to be good or bad. But beneath all these cultural stories lies something more personal, your own inner myth. This is where shadow work begins. So, what is the shadow? It isn't a monster you need to defeat. It isn't evil. The shadow is simply the collection of everything you've pushed aside, traits, emotions, and memories that didn't fit the image of who you thought you should be. As children, we learn quickly what earns approval and what brings rejection. Smile, and you're praised. Cry too loudly, and you're told to be quiet. Show anger, and someone calls you difficult. Ask too many questions, and you're told to stop. So, what do? We hide parts of ourselves. We tuck them away in the unconscious, where they wait. Over time, those pieces form the shadow. But here's the thing, what you bury doesn't disappear. It leaks out. In jealousy, when someone else succeeds. In defensiveness, when someone points out your flaws. In overcompensating, always trying to be the good one. The shadow shows up in your relationships, your work, your creativity, and if you never face it, your personal myth stays incomplete like a fairy tale, where the hero never dares to enter the forest. Why does this matter so much today? Because the pace of modern life constantly pushes us to project perfect images. On social media, we curate highlights, vacations, promotions, smiles. At work, we show ambition and competence. In relationships, we want to appear caring and worthy. But behind the mask, so many people feel exhausted, anxious, or disconnected from themselves. This is where shadow work steps in. It pulls back the curtain and asks, who are you when no one is watching? What emotions have you locked away? What story are you living that doesn't actually belong to you? When you explore the shadow, you reclaim what was lost. That anger you hide? It might be your strength to set boundaries. That jealousy? It could reveal a longing to create. That sadness you never speak of? It may hold the key to compassion deeper than you ever imagined. And this is why myths and fairy tales matter. They are safe containers. They show us wolves, witches, forests, and treasures that stand in for what we can't face directly. Instead of confronting rage head-on, we meet it in the villain. Instead of acknowledging longing, we see it in the wanderer searching for home. When you reinterpret these stories, you begin to reinterpret yourself. You see that every character in the tale, the hero, the trickster, the monster, the mentor, lives inside you. Shadow work through modern fairy tales isn't about dusty folklore. It's about decoding your own psyche with the maps humanity has carried for centuries. So let me ask you, what story are you living right now? Are you stuck as the rescuer, always saving others but never yourself? Are you caught in the endless loop of the victim, feeling like life happens to you instead of through you? Or are you the wanderer, searching for something you can't quite name? Recognizing your role is the first step. Transformation comes when you step outside the script, when you face the shadow character in your story and discover it isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. As we move forward, we'll walk through symbolic stories, decode modern myths, and uncover the signs of the shadow in daily life. And along the way, you'll find small practices you can try, ways to begin rewriting your personal myth. Because here's the truth: the shadow never disappears. But when you invite it into the light, when you give it a seat at the table, it gives back everything it's been holding for you: your creativity, your power, your wholeness. And that's how you stop living someone else's story and begin to live your own. Let me tell you a story. There was a young woman who lived in a quiet town. By day she smiled, worked hard, and played her role perfectly. But at night she kept having the same dream: a locked attic in her childhood home. She knew something was waiting behind that door, but every time she reached for the key she woke up. This isn't just a dream, it's a modern fairy tale of the shadow. The locked attic is the unconscious. The key is awareness. And what waits inside are the parts of herself she's been avoiding, the personal myth she never wanted to face. Now pause here. Don't we all have our own locked attic? Maybe it's a memory you never revisit. Maybe it's the part of you that was called too much. Maybe it's the passion you buried to be practical. Fairy tales, both old and new, are full of locked doors, forbidden rooms, and hidden places. Bluebeard's castle, Beauty and the Beast's forbidden wing. Even modern stories, The Basement in Get Out, The Upside Down and Stranger Things. These aren't just spooky devices, they're symbols. They represent the shadow, what we fear most, yet are strangely drawn to. And the woman in the story isn't alone. In real life, a man I'll call Daniel carried a similar attic inside him. On the surface, he looked successful. A steady job, a stable relationship, the kind of man everyone called reliable. But inside, he carried a heaviness he couldn't name. Through journaling, Daniel remembered being told as a child, never cry, never show weakness. So he locked away his sadness, his tenderness, even his capacity for vulnerability. He became strong, yes, but also distant. Reliable, but emotionally cut off. And in his dreams, like the woman, he kept finding himself before a locked door. This is what happens when your shadow stays sealed. Life feels safe, predictable, but also strangely flat. You play the role you've been assigned but lose the essence of who you are. Here's the twist. The shadow isn't only what you fear, it's also what you long for. For Daniel, the attic didn't hide a monster. It hid his ability to feel deeply. By facing the pain of rejection, he found compassion, softness, and more authentic connection. What he thought was dangerous turned out to be healing. So why do these images, locked rooms, hidden places, strike us so deeply? Because they bypass logic, they bypass defenses, they speak the language of the unconscious, the same language as dreams, myths, and stories. That's why shadow work through fairy tales is so powerful. Instead of saying, "I'm repressing my sadness," you imagine yourself stepping into a forbidden room. Instead of analyzing envy, you picture a dragon guarding the treasure you want. Symbols let you touch emotions you've avoided without drowning in them. Here's something you can try. Close your eyes and picture a locked door in a place you know well, your childhood home, a school hallway, maybe even your current apartment. Ask yourself, what's behind that door? Don't overthink it. Let the first image appear. That image is a message from your shadow. It might be frightening. It might be strange. It might even be beautiful. Write it down. Explore what it could mean. That's how you start rewriting your myth. The truth is, the attic door isn't just a dream. It's a symbol of how we live, polished on the outside, restless on the inside. And the fairy tales we grew up with aren't just fantasies, they're guides. They invite us to enter the forest, open the forbidden room, face the monster, and discover the treasure, not gold, but wholeness. So, let me ask you, what's the attic you've been afraid to enter? Because ahead, we'll start naming the signs that your shadow is already shaping your everyday life. And once you recognize them, you'll see how your personal myth has been guiding you all along. The shadow doesn't knock politely. It slips into your life in subtle ways, through emotions, reactions, and patterns you can't seem to control. At first, it feels like coincidence, but once you know what to look for, the signs are unmistakable. Let's explore the first three. Overreactions that surprise you. Have you ever snapped at someone over something small? Maybe a partner forgot to text back. Maybe a coworker interrupted you. And suddenly, a wave of anger bursts out way bigger than the situation. That's the shadow. When your reaction feels bigger than the moment, it usually means an old wound has been touched. The present is just the spark. The real fire comes from something buried long ago. Think of a man who grew up under constant criticism. As an adult, even gentle feedback at work unleashes defensiveness. It's not about the comment, it's about the shadow memory of never being good enough. The next time you overreact, pause. Instead of asking, "Why did they do that?" ask, "Why did I react this way?" Write down the moment, the emotion, and the memory it connects to. That's the shadow surfacing. The people who irritate you most. Notice the personalities that really get under your skin. Not mild annoyance, but the kind of irritation that makes you think, "I can't stand people like that." Here's the twist. Often, what we despise in others is a trait we've disowned in ourselves. The loud coworker might reflect the boldness you buried. The overly confident friend might embody the ambition you were told was selfish. The needy partner might mirror your own longing for care. It's easier to see the problem out there than admit it lives in here. Try this. List 3 people who irritate you most. Write down the traits that bother you. Then ask, where does this live in me? It doesn't mean you're just like them. It means your shadow is showing you the part you've exiled, the roles you can't stop playing. Life often feels like a stage. Masks aren't always bad. We adapt, we adjust. But when you feel trapped in one role, unable to step out, the shadow is in control. Maybe you're always the rescuer, rushing to fix everyone else's problems, or the achiever, piling up accomplishments to prove your worth, or the peacemaker, smoothing things over while ignoring your own needs. These roles once kept you safe, but as an adult, they become cages. And every time you silence yourself to keep the role alive, your shadow grows stronger. Ask yourself, what role do I feel stuck in? Who benefits from me staying in it? And what part of me gets silenced because of it? That silenced voice is your shadow, waiting to be heard. Think about it this way. Your shadow doesn't only show up in nightmares or strange symbols. It shows up in your daily frustrations, your emotional spikes, your recurring roles. Every overreaction, every irritation, every stuck mask is a doorway. Most people run from the doorway. They double down, blame others, or shame themselves. Shadow work invites you to do the opposite. Pause, lean in, and look closer. Because when you do, you realize the monster isn't outside the door. It's inside you, waiting to be acknowledged. And once you face it, the monster begins to shrink. Up next, we'll uncover 3 more signs of the shadow ones that dig deeper, touching not only your emotions, but also your relationships and the longings you rarely admit out loud. The shadow doesn't just show itself in quick reactions or roles you can't escape. It also hides in your longings, your habits, and the subtle ways you hold yourself back. Let's look at 3 more signs that reveal its presence. The dreams that haunt you. Dreams are the theater of the unconscious. When your mind rests, the shadow comes alive on stage. That's why dreams can feel strange, unsettling, or packed with symbols that don't make sense at first. Maybe you're being chased. Maybe you're trapped in a maze. Maybe someone you trusted suddenly turns against you. These aren't random, they're messages. One woman dreamed repeatedly of a black dog following her. At first, it terrified her. But when she wrote about it, she realized the dog symbolized grief she'd avoided since her father's death. The dream wasn't a nightmare, it was her shadow, asking to be seen. Try keeping a dream journal for a week. Each morning, write whatever you remember, even fragments. Then ask, what emotion does this dream stir in me? That emotion is the shadow speaking. The patterns you can't break. Look at the loops in your life, the ones that repeat no matter how hard you try to change them. Do you always attract partners who eventually leave? Do you always quit just before reaching success? Do you procrastinate even when you want something deeply? These patterns aren't random. They're the shadow acting out old, unfinished scripts. Like a film reel stuck on repeat, the story keeps playing until you face what's hidden inside it. Someone who grew up feeling invisible might keep choosing relationships where they're overlooked. Why? Because the shadow keeps recreating the original wound, hoping it will finally be healed. Pick one pattern you can't seem to escape. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what part of me is trying to be acknowledged through this pattern? The emotions you judge the most. We all have emotions we rank as unacceptable. For some, it's anger. For others, envy. For others, deep sadness. Somewhere along the way, you learned that showing this emotion would cost you love or belonging. So you buried it. But buried emotions don't disappear. They return as tension in the body, as anxiety, or as judgment of others. You might see someone express anger and feel disgust because your shadow still carries the anger you've never released. I once worked with a man who despised lazy people. He couldn't stand seeing anyone rest while he worked hard. But beneath his judgment was a secret longing, his own desire for rest. As a child, he was only praised when productive. So, relaxation felt shameful. His judgment of others was really judgment of himself. Notice the emotion you criticize most in others. Ask, where was I taught it wasn't okay to feel this? That's where your shadow is waiting. Together, these three signs, the dreams that haunt you, the patterns you can't break, and the emotions you judge, make up a deeper layer of the shadow. They don't just disturb your day-to-day life, they shape the very myth you live, the silent story running beneath your choices. Here's the empowering part. The moment you recognize these signs, the story begins to shift. What once felt like fate turns into choice. What once felt like a curse becomes an invitation. And in the next part, we'll go even further, into the hidden signs most people never see yet, Jung warned. These are the most dangerous if left in the dark. The most dangerous aspects of the shadow aren't the obvious ones. They're the subtle, hidden forces quietly steering your life without you realizing it. Jung warned that these are the parts we resist most, because they challenge the image we hold of ourselves. Let's look at 3 of these deeper signs. The persona you protect too much. We all wear masks, and that's normal. At work, you may present as confident, with friends as supportive, online as inspiring. But when your whole identity depends on one mask, the shadow lurks right behind it. Think of the man who's always the funny one. His humor entertains, diffuses tension, and makes him loved. But behind the laughter is deep loneliness he can't admit. Or the woman who's the strong one. She never cries, never asks for help, never leans on anyone, but behind her strength is exhaustion and the quiet longing to be cared for. The shadow hides in the gap between who you show and who you are. And the shinier the mask, the stronger the hidden self becomes. Ask yourself, what role do I need others to believe about me, no matter what? Then ask, what do I fear would happen if that mask slipped? That fear points you straight to your shadow, the accidents that reveal truth. Have you ever said something you didn't mean or forgotten to do something you never wanted to do anyway? These slips aren't random. They're the shadow breaking through. A man might jokingly call his boss "Mom," then laugh it off. But the slip reveals an unconscious longing for parental approval at work. Or someone forgets a friend's birthday not because they don't care, but because resentment has been quietly living in the shadow. Instead of brushing off mistakes or slips, pause and ask, What truth was I trying to express unconsciously? You may be surprised by the honesty hiding in what you called an accident. The self-sabotage that feels inevitable. Perhaps the deepest sign of shadow influence is the way we undermine ourselves. You want success, but procrastinate until the chance slips away. You long for love, but push away anyone who gets close. You dream of change, but sabotage it before it begins. This isn't weakness or laziness. It's the shadow protecting its secrets. The unconscious part of you fears change, because change would mean confronting what's been hidden. So, it throws up distractions, excuses, and obstacles. Think of a fairy tale where the hero hesitates at the forest's edge. The dragon isn't the danger. The real danger is the voice inside whispering, "Don't go. Stay where it's safe." That whisper is the shadow. Pick one area where you keep sabotaging yourself. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask, "What hidden fear is being protected by this sabotage?" That hidden fear is the shadow's guard dog. These deeper signs, the rigid mask, the accidental slips, the cycles of self-sabotage aren't easy to face. They strike at the core of who you think you are. They force you to question whether the life you're living is really your own. But here's the truth. The shadow doesn't show up to destroy you. It shows up to complete you. Every mask hides a deeper truth. Every slip carries honesty. Every sabotage points to a hidden longing. When you learn to see these signs, your personal myth begins to shift. You stop being trapped in a half-written story. You become the author who finally sees the invisible ink. And in the next part, we'll turn from awareness to practice. I'll guide you through journaling and exercises that bring the shadow into the light, not as an enemy, but as a forgotten friend. Becoming aware of the shadow is powerful, but awareness alone isn't enough. To truly shift your story, you need practices that invite the shadow out of hiding and give it space to speak. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about listening, integrating, and allowing forgotten parts of you to return. Journaling is one of the most direct ways to do this. The power of the pen. Writing slows the mind. It cuts through excuses and rationalizations. When you put words on paper, patterns you've ignored begin to appear. The unconscious, which speaks in fragments and symbols, finally has a voice. Think of journaling as opening that locked attic door one word at a time. Exercise 1. The mirror list. Draw a line down the center of a page. On the left side, list traits in others that irritate or trigger you. On the right side, write their opposites. For example, she's selfish on the left. She knows how to prioritize herself on the right. Then ask yourself, which of these opposite qualities have I denied in myself? Exercise 2. The role you play. At the top of a page, write, "The role I always play is," then free write for 10 minutes without stopping. Don't edit, just let it flow. When you're done, read it back and circle the lines that sting. Maybe you wrote, "I'm always the fixer. People depend on me, but I feel drained." Or, "I'm the quiet one. I hide, so I won't be judged." Then ask, what part of me has been silenced so I can keep playing this role? That silenced voice is a piece of your shadow. Exercise 3. Rewrite a fairy tale. Choose a story you loved as a child, maybe Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, or even Harry Potter. Write down the character you identified with most. Then ask, which character repelled me the most? Now, rewrite a short scene where the two meet not as enemies but as allies. What would the villain say if they weren't trying to destroy, but to guide? This helps you see the shadow not as a monster, but as a hidden teacher. Exercise 4. A letter to the shadow. Close your eyes. Picture a part of yourself you've always rejected. Anger, envy, laziness, fear. Imagine it standing in front of you as a person. Now write, "Dear Shadow, I see you. Tell this part what you've avoided, what you fear, and what you secretly need." Then switch perspectives. Write back as the shadow. Let it answer you. The words may surprise you. The shadow might say, "I've been protecting you. I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here to return the strength you keep denying." Exercise 5. Daily micro-integration. Shadow work doesn't just live in a journal, it lives in your day. Try small practices like these. When irritation or envy rises, Take 3 breaths and whisper to yourself, "Shadow, I see you." Once a day, make one small choice you'd usually avoid. Say no, share an honest opinion, or let yourself rest. Keep an object nearby, a stone, a feather, a drawing that represents your shadow. Let it remind you that wholeness includes both light and dark. Why practice matters. It's easy to treat ideas about the shadow like entertainment. Watch a video, nod along, then move on. But transformation only happens when you engage directly with the unconscious. Journaling, rewriting, dialoguing, these aren't just exercises, they're rituals. They create a space where your shadow no longer has to hide. And the more you practice, the more you realize the shadow isn't a burden. It's a guide back to authenticity. So let me ask you, what if the part of yourself you've rejected most is actually the key to your freedom? What if the monster you've been running from is carrying your crown? Up next, we'll see how the shadow plays out in love and intimacy, because nowhere does it reveal itself more quickly or more painfully than in relationships. If you want to know where your shadow hides, look at your relationships. Romantic love, friendships, even family ties, they are mirrors, reflecting not only your light, but also the parts of you you'd rather not see. Jung once said that marriage is the highest form of individuation because living closely with another person forces the unconscious into the open. The mirror of love. At the start of a relationship, everything feels magical. We project our best qualities onto the other person: beauty, strength, charm, wisdom. Jung called this the projection of anima and animus. We place our inner ideal onto someone else, but eventually the projection cracks. What once felt like charm now feels like arrogance. What once felt like passion now feels like volatility. What once felt like steadiness now feels like boredom. What happened? The shadow stepped in. Relationships are the stage where your personal myth collides with someone else's. Every wound, every fear, every disowned part of you comes alive in the dance of intimacy. How the shadow shapes attraction. Think about the kinds of partners you've been drawn to. Do you see a pattern? The aloof ones you try to win over? The nurturing ones who feel like home? The wild ones who spark your sense of adventure? Attraction often isn't random. It's the shadow, pulling you toward what you've lost in yourself. The quiet one seeks the outspoken. The responsible one seeks the carefree. The rational one seeks the dreamer. This isn't just romance, it's myth unfolding in real life. Conflict. As shadow dialogue. When arguments erupt, most of us think, if only my partner would change, everything would be fine. But shadow work asks a different question. What part of me is being mirrored right now? If your partner's anger terrifies you, maybe your shadow is holding the anger you never express. If their neediness annoys you, maybe your shadow is still longing for the comfort you never received. If their independence feels like abandonment, maybe your shadow carries the wound of being left behind. Every conflict is a dialogue between shadows, not just personalities. Seeing this can transform fights into growth. A real story. Sarah and Michael loved each other deeply, yet they fought constantly. Michael said Sarah was controlling. Sarah said Michael was irresponsible. Through shadow work, Sarah saw that her control came from growing up in chaos. She managed everything because she feared losing safety. Michael's irresponsibility came from a rebellion against strict parents. Once they recognized the shadows beneath their fights, they could finally speak about the real fears: her fear of abandonment, his fear of suffocation. Their conflict wasn't about chores. It was about the myths they were unconsciously reliving. Practices for couples. When you feel hurt, write down the moment and ask, what does this remind me of from my past? Share it with your partner as self-discovery, not blame. Try speaking as your shadow. My shadow says, I'm afraid you'll leave me. Let your partner do the same. This creates honesty without disguise. Identify the roles you both play: hero and victim, parent and child. Then agree to write a new story together as partners on the same quest. Why love matters for shadow work. Alone, you can avoid your shadow. In love, you can't. Intimacy drags hidden wounds to the surface. That's why relationships feel both beautiful and painful. They are crucibles where transformation becomes unavoidable. And here's the gift. Once you learn to see the shadow in your partner and in yourself, You stop seeing conflict as failure. You see it as myth unfolding. Each attraction is a mirror. Each argument is an invitation. Each heartbreak is a teacher. So let me ask you, what role are you playing in your relationships right now? And what story are you asking your partner to complete for you? In the next part, we'll move into the public sphere, how the shadow shapes careers, ambition, and the masks we wear in social life. If relationships are the mirror of the shadow in love, then work and social life are the stage where the shadow performs for everyone to see. Every meeting, every friendship, every role you play in public reveals pieces of you that may be hidden from yourself. Just like in fairy tales, the masks we wear in society often conceal as much as they reveal. The workplace as a modern fairy tale. Think of your career as a kingdom. There are heroes, villains, tricksters, and rulers. Promotions and achievements often act like magical treasures, the golden apples we chase. But here's the truth. Much of what drives us at work isn't passion. It's shadow. The person obsessed with success may be running from a deep fear of failure. The one who avoids responsibility may secretly doubt their own capability. The perfectionist may be hiding shame beneath their polished surface. The workplace becomes a stage where unconscious myths repeat themselves day after day. Shadow in authority and power. Notice how you react to authority figures. Do you admire them, resent them, or feel intimidated? Often, your boss isn't just a boss, they're a projection. They carry the traits of a parent, a teacher, or another figure from your past. I once knew a man who clashed with every supervisor he had. Every instruction felt like an attack. When he reflected, he realized his shadow still carried anger from growing up under a critical father. The office wasn't just about tasks. It was a replay of his unfinished myth. Ask yourself, how do I respond to authority? And what old story might I be replaying in that reaction? Shadow, in colleagues and social circles. Social life works the same way. That colleague who sparks your envy, the friend whose confidence makes you shrink, the party where you suddenly feel invisible, these aren't coincidences. They're signals. When you feel jealousy, the shadow is pointing to qualities you've denied in yourself. When you feel invisible, the shadow is showing you the part of you that longs to be expressed. One woman told me she hated networking events. Everyone feels fake, she said. But beneath that judgment was her own shadow, a longing for real connection, coupled with a fear of rejection. By rejecting the whole setting, she was also rejecting her own desire to be seen. Ask yourself, am I rejecting this situation, or am I rejecting the part of me that wants something here? Shadow in ambition and achievement. Ambition can be noble, but when it's fueled by the shadow, it's exhausting. The person who works endless hours may be chasing validation they never received. The one who constantly compares may be covering insecurity. The high achiever who checks every box but still feels empty may have built a career around someone else's myth, not their own. This is why burnout can feel so hollow. It isn't only physical exhaustion. It's the unconscious realization that the story you've been chasing doesn't belong to you. Take one of your biggest goals and ask, if I achieve this, what do I believe it will finally prove about me? The answer reveals the shadow beneath the ambition. Rewriting the social myth. Work and social life aren't just obligations. They're stages where transformation is possible. When you become aware of the shadow at play, you stop being a puppet in the story. You begin to see the boss as a projection, the rival as a mirror, the achievement as a symbol. And then you can choose differently. Instead of chasing validation, you choose authenticity. Instead of envying others, you learn from their reflection. Instead of hiding in masks, you bring more of your whole self forward. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition or avoiding society. It means seeing the myth beneath it all and living consciously rather than unconsciously. So ask yourself, what role are you playing at work or in your social world? And is that role helping you grow or keeping your shadow in the dark? Next, we'll step into a trap that often looks like light but is actually shadow in disguise. Spiritual bypassing, the tendency to use positivity or spiritual ideas to avoid real healing. Not all shadows hide in darkness. Some of the most deceptive ones wear robes of light. Jung warned of this danger. When spirituality becomes a mask, it can keep us from facing the wounds we most need to heal. Today, we call this spiritual bypassing. What spiritual bypassing looks like. It happens when we use spiritual ideas or practices to avoid uncomfortable emotions, unresolved pain, or the messiness of real life. It sounds like wisdom, but it's really avoidance. Think about it, saying, everything happens for a reason, when what someone really needs is space to grieve. Preaching, just stay positive, while secretly drowning in despair. Meditating for hours, not to connect with yourself, but to escape anger. On the outside, it looks like growth. But underneath, the shadow still holds the truth. Why it's so tempting? Why do we fall into this trap? Because facing the shadow is hard. It's easier to cover fear with affirmations than to admit you feel powerless. It's easier to smile and say, love and light, than to face envy, rage, or grief. And modern culture makes it even easier. Social media is full of perfect morning routines, glowing faces, and calm voices. Spirituality becomes another performance, another mask. But real healing isn't performance, it's confrontation. A flower doesn't grow without soil, and soil is made of decay. In the same way, wholeness doesn't grow without shadow. Everyday examples. The positivity mask. Telling yourself to focus on blessings every time sadness comes up. Gratitude is healthy until it silences grief. The forgiveness shortcut. Rushing to forgive while skipping the step of actually acknowledging the hurt. The wound stays hidden, festering in the shadow. The detachment illusion, claiming to be above it all, when really you're numbing yourself from feeling too deeply. These traps don't heal, they delay. They wrap the wound in golden cloth so no one sees the blood underneath. A real story. I once knew a man deeply devoted to yoga and meditation. On the outside, he seemed calm, enlightened, but his relationships kept collapsing. He avoided conflict, never expressed anger, and said he was too spiritual for drama. Underneath his calmness was rage from childhood neglect. His peace wasn't peace at all, it was avoidance. When he finally admitted this, his practice changed. Meditation stopped being an escape and became a space to meet his anger. That was the true beginning of his healing. How to avoid the trap. Ask yourself, am I using this practice to connect with my feelings or to avoid them? Write down one habit that might be covering a wound. The next time you feel like saying, it's fine, I'm grateful, pause. Ask, what's the real emotion underneath? Name it before moving into gratitude. Blend your practices. Instead of meditating only for calm, meditate on anger itself. Light a candle not to escape grief, but to sit with it. The deeper lesson, true spirituality isn't escape, it's integration. Fairy tales remind us of this again and again. The hero doesn't avoid the forest by chanting positive words. They enter the forest, they face the wolf, the witch, the dragon. Only then does transformation happen. Your shadow is part of your spiritual path. Without it, your light is fragile. With it, your light becomes rooted, steady, unshakable. So ask yourself, where might you be covering wounds with words of light? And what could happen if, instead of bypassing, you let yourself descend into the forest, into the shadow, so you could rise with real strength? Next, we'll return to Jung himself and explore one of his deepest insights. The collective shadow, the dark myth, not just of individuals, but of entire societies. Up to now, we've explored the shadow as something personal, your hidden emotions, your buried roles, your private myths. But Jung went further. He believed the shadow isn't just individual, it's also collective. Entire societies carry shadows of their own, and when those shadows remain unacknowledged, they shape history in powerful and often destructive ways. The collective shadow. Just as you repress unwanted traits, societies repress unwanted truths. A culture that worships success may repress vulnerability. A nation that celebrates freedom may repress the reality of inequality. A community that prides itself on kindness may repress its aggression until it explodes in hidden ways. The collective shadow appears in racism, war, corruption, propaganda, or cultural obsessions. It shows up in the myths. Societies tell themselves the myth of superiority, the myth of progress, the myth of eternal innocence. Modern myths of the collective. Fairy tales aren't only personal, they're cultural. Think of superhero movies watched by millions. They often split the world into good and evil, hero and villain. But beneath that simple storyline lies a shadow truth. Societies crave heroes because they fear their own capacity for destruction. Or consider dystopian stories like The Hunger Games or Black Mirror. These aren't just entertainment. They're modern myths exposing the collective shadow of surveillance, inequality, and obsession with technology. The stories we binge-watch are like dreams. They reveal what we can't face directly in waking life. Jung's warning. Jung lived through 2 world wars. He saw what happens when collective shadows are ignored. Entire nations projected their hidden fears onto scapegoats, turning human beings into others who could be hated or destroyed. He wrote that humanity's greatest danger isn't natural disaster, it's unconsciousness. When millions of individuals deny their shadow, it gathers strength in the collective. And once unleashed, it becomes almost unstoppable. The collective shadow today. Look around and you'll see the signs. Social media amplifies projection, people demonizing others while refusing to examine their own wounds. Politics becomes a battlefield, fueled less by facts than by unconscious fear. Consumer culture preaches endless positivity, while loneliness and depression quietly rise. We live inside a collective myth of progress and connection, while beneath it grows a shadow of emptiness and disconnection. Your role in the collective myth. It's easy to feel powerless against something so big, but Jung believed the transformation of the collective begins with the individual. When you face your shadow, you ripple change outward. Every time you project less, the world carries less blame. Every time you integrate your anger, the world holds less violence. Every time you live your own story instead of someone else's, the collective myth becomes more authentic. Reflections to try. Ask yourself, what cultural story am I living inside without questioning? Maybe the story of constant productivity, or the story of endless self-improvement. Ask, what enrages me most about society? That anger may point to a personal shadow connected to the collective. Finally ask, how can I live differently, even in small ways, to bring light into the shared myth? The gift of the collective shadow. It may sound heavy, but Jung also believed the shadow carries potential. Just as your personal shadow hides your gifts, the collective shadow hides humanity's growth. When inequality is faced, justice can emerge. When violence is acknowledged, peace can be created. When emptiness is admitted, new meaning can be born. The collective shadow is frightening, yes, but it is also the soil where new myths grow. So ask yourself, what collective myths are you living inside without even realizing it? And what would it mean for you, not society, not the government, but you to start rewriting the story? In the final part, we'll bring everything together. We'll close this journey with a vision of wholeness and an invitation for you to keep walking the path of shadow work, because this isn't just about hearing a story. It's about living a new one. We began this journey with a simple idea. Your life is a story, a personal myth shaped not only by the choices you remember, but also by the shadows you've forgotten. We've seen how overreactions, irritations, and repeating roles are not accidents. They're the shadow knocking at your door. We explored how dreams, patterns, and judgments reveal what you've buried. We uncovered the deeper traps of masks, slips, and self-sabotage. We practiced journaling, fairy tale rewrites, and honest dialogues. We looked at how the shadow shows up in love, in work, and even in spirituality. And finally, we stepped back to see the collective shadow, the dark myths entire societies live inside. So where does this leave you? The hero returning home. In every fairy tale, the hero goes on a journey. They leave home, face trials, step into the forest, fight the dragon, and find the treasure. But the story doesn't end there. The true ending is the return. The hero comes back, transformed, carrying a gift not just for themselves, but for their people. That's where you are now. You've walked through the forest of your unconscious. You've peeked into the attic, faced the masks, and seen the traps. You've touched your shadow. And now you carry something priceless: awareness. Awareness is the treasure, because once you see the shadow, you can't unsee it. You can't keep living someone else's story without feeling the weight of it. You hold the key to your myth, and you are free to rewrite it, an invitation to integration. So the question is, what will you do with this treasure? Will you lock it away again, saying it was just an interesting idea? Or will you use it today, tomorrow, in small choices to welcome the shadow into the light? Shadow work isn't a single ritual. It's a lifelong practice. Every moment of irritation, every dream, every slip of the tongue is another invitation to pause and ask, what is my shadow trying to show me? The more you practice, the more whole you become. And the more whole you become, the more your story shifts not just for you, but for everyone around you. A final fairy tale image. Picture yourself at the edge of a dark forest. For years, you've turned away, afraid of what lives inside. But now, you carry a lantern. You take a breath, step forward, your heart racing but alive. Inside, you meet the monster, and instead of fighting it, you sit down beside it. You look into its face, and to your surprise, it looks like yours. You realize it was never here to harm you. It was holding the part of you you left behind. That moment, that embrace, is shadow work. That's the rewriting of your myth. Your next step. If this journey has stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Keep practicing. Journal, reflect, share your insights. Start conversations about the shadow, because the more we talk, the less power the darkness holds. And remember, the story of your life is still being written, and now you hold the pen.